On today's episode, we are breaking down the NHL Draft Combine with the help of somebody who's actually there. Anthony Donati joins the show here, the Prospect On, to talk about the NHL Draft Combine with lots of exciting news here in store for you.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USHL scout over at Elite Prospects. And on today's episode, we are joined by Anthony Donati. How's it going, buddy?
It is awesome. I have so much to talk about today. Thank you for having me on.
Absolute pleasure. We've had this in the works for a little while before you even went to the combine. I put in a message basically saying I want to break this down with you after the fact. So glad that this is happening, and very glad that you have loads of stuff to talk about. So for the structure of today's show, we're going to kick things off with just any like news relating to NHL trades or draft stuff, anything that the people want to hear basically in terms of intel, and then go a bit more into what your experience was there at the combine before moving on to just some things that maybe your impressions were in interviews either at the combine itself or I mean throughout the year because you did like 1,800 interviews this year, something along
Yeah,
those lines, right? You
yeah,
did a
about
whole
30
bunch
before
of
the
them.
combine.
And then we'll wrap things up in the final segment by playing a little bit of a mock draft type of game of basically just seeing which players you would want for the Blackhawks with their respective first round picks and which players I would want for the Montreal Canadiens with their respective first round picks, sticking with the teams that we follow closest. So that's kind of the structure here today. So let's just dive straight into the show and kick it off with what was the combine like for you, Anthony?
Yeah, the combine was an incredible experience. I think that the thing that most shocked me was that there was just so many readily available prospects that you could talk to at any sort of time. The media scrums were definitely interesting. You had to be the first person there to try to talk to the prospects, give them your questions. If somebody had their locked on prospect basically their camera on a prospect, I think that it was very hard to get them away from that prospect because like Mason West, it's very hard to get a question off. But once you get more comfortable, there's 65 plus prospects. So you're going to have some really good ones where you ask a prospect a question and you get a bunch of laughs. I think I started gaining more confidence there, and it was just an incredible experience. I got to have a lot of sit downs, and me and James Haggins had like drinks, which was waters with some ice in there, so water on the rocks. And then I had Ben Kindle. I had a bunch of different prospects that we were just talking to. I think the main thing is that you can see GMs basically sitting on the bleachers, and Mike Rear, Kyle Dubas, they said hi, like hey to me, like they were very open to everybody. Free Jersey Mike subs, that was pretty cool value. I got like a couple cookies, so obviously I had to do a couple more push-ups in the gym, but you just hear a lot of stuff that's going on during that time. There's so many rumors. I mean, I heard incredible amount of rumors. There was a couple parents that came up to me, they knew my stuff and I hadn't even interviewed their kid, so I think that it gave me a lot of, I didn't have as much imposter syndrome as I thought I would, just because like people knew who I was and I had no idea why or anything. But Chris Peters, Cam Robinson, those guys, they're pros. They made it so easy for me. So obviously coming from Elite Prospects, you guys got an incredible crew with Cam Robinson. It's really all people that know puck and just want to be around it and talk it all the time. So me, who's just a puck nerd, we just talked and nerded out. It was a great experience.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally relate with a lot of the things that you were kind of bringing up there in terms of the difficulty of asking questions in those scrums, as well as like how the imposter syndrome kind of comes into it when you're all of a sudden going from talking about these players at your desk to being in front of them in reality. I remember like the first draft that I went to was in Nashville in 2023, and I fired off an interview question for Connor Bedard at the press conference, and that was something where it's like, okay, I had to work myself up a little bit to get that question off, and then afterwards there was like scrums for like 10 of the top prospects in the draft, including Zach Benson, and I was basically like 3 feet away from him. I was like the second layer of people asking him questions, and I didn't even ask him anything in the end because I was just so happily listening to what he was saying because he would spend like 2 minutes on each answer. So I didn't even need to ask anything to get like a tremendous amount of insight. So definitely understand all of that. But I mean, the coolest part about it is just being around those people, whether it's people that, like you and I, talk about these things in the public, or encountering people that work in the league, right? Like it's a really cool melting pot in that sense. So very glad for you that you had that experience there at the combine. But let's not let the people wait too much longer here on the actual insights you got,
Yeah.
because you got some pretty fun like rumors there. So talk me through some of the standouts. Maybe kick it off with like the biggest fish that you heard, and then maybe some of the more fun rumors that were swirling around, whether it's draft related or trade related in the NHL.
It's a little bit different how you extract information at one of these kind of events. It's not what you think. You don't go up to somebody and say something. I think that the word just kind of spreads, as well as in June 5th, a couple days before the actual media availability for the combine. The thing that I heard was that the Islanders are not satisfied with just picking number one. They do want to come up and try to get James Haggins. And I thought this was interesting because James Haggins is obviously a New York guy. He loves the Islanders. He has a bunch of posters of John Tavares, who actually the last first round pick that they or first overall pick was a Maple Leafs fan, and so is Matthew Schaefer. So I think Darsh is going to pick Matthew Schaefer number one. I think that's just going to be locked in, and I think that the there's rumors. Cam Robinson tweeted that the Blackhawks might be interested in trading up, and obviously they would be. Michael Misa would be a fantastic fit, but will the Sharks, trade down? Who would be the other option there for the Sharks if Islanders are going to be solidified with Schaefer? Sharks are going to trade down to try to get Martone. I just don't see that as a real possibility. Utah is real smoke towards Brady Martin. I think that we can absolutely see a scenario where for the Habs fans out there watching, 16, 17, maybe one of their eight picks in the first 3 rounds of this class because they're absolutely loaded with assets. I think that they can certainly try to come up for somebody that I think is the best fit like a glove prospect to team in the entire class would be Caleb Desnoyers and the Habs. I've been saying this for a long time. They need a true number two center. I think that he would be a fantastic fit the way that he plays, true defensive forward. So if the real thing that Utah really wants Brady Martin, which he aced all of his interviews during there, he's a real farm boy, 170 pounds, but he could hit like a bulldozer. I think that it would be fair to say that Utah could trade back to 16, 17, and then trade up from the 16th pick again and try to target somebody like Brady Martin. Because I don't see Brady Martin necessarily going in the top 10 because of a player like Roger McQueen, who I think will be taken number 7 overall, because Roger McQueen's back injury actually wasn't as bad as they previously expected, and there was a misdiagnosis, and he's been pain-free for the last 30 days, and that's why he was able to do bench press and pull-ups. I think Jackson Smith going to Penn State is not actually going to be accurate. I talked to Jackson Smith's camp, and I think a lot of people have, if you know the story of what happened, but Jackson Smith is definitely one of those players that I could see going to Penn State with his buddy, maybe Gavin McKenna, and I also think that that's going to be. I think Gavin McKenna is going to go to a state school. I think he is going to the NCAA. Everything I've heard is Medicine Cat's not going to be able to retain him, and
Same
Jake
here.
O'Brien. Yep, Jake O'Brien is going like Jake O'Brien. Funny thing is, Stevie Y actually got to see Jake O'Brien and went to the OHL 3 times in Brantford to see this guy. He doesn't usually do that, so I think a trade up could actually be there for the Red Wings to try to get up if Jake O'Brien falls, but obviously he's going to be highly coveted. I've heard Jake O'Brien to the Flyers at 6 is something, and I think that the Blackhawks are going to be locked into Anton Friendel at 3. I'm actually going to
Yeah.
be. I talked to Anton's agent today trying to get a Marcus Kruger interview because I think that would be a perfect interview. Marcus Kruger, obviously 2-time Stanley Cup champ with the Blackhawks, and then you have him playing in the league with him and Victor Eklund. I would want to see that. Victor Eklund is one of the biggest personalities in this entire class. Lyndon Lakovich is an absolute incredible person. Carter Bear is skating now, and he's also going to be participating in some hockey activities over the summer, and he was just a awesome person. He is really great to talk to, very grounded, did not understand that this experience was going to happen 2 years out. He really had to focus on playing his game, hard skill, very hard-nosed player, could get to the center of the ice, very skilled, great backhand. I think that that goes underrated. I think that he is one of those players that really could go higher than his draft value, in my opinion, which is around 15, 16. I would love it if the Habs got him. Obviously, when we did that draft, we were talking about him going to the Habs, and I think it would have been a tremendous fit. And that was after the lacerated Achilles injury. I think that going down the board here, Lyndon Lakovich is an absolute superstar. He talked to every single person. He remembered me when I talked to him for that little time, and he said that he had the hairiest legs that anybody has in the combine, and he gets chirped for it all the time. I think that is something that needs to be said. Radim Merca is somebody that's cool because Radim Merca played against adults when he was 16. And the thing is, he is a very funny guy, but it takes a lot. He's like an egg. Once you crack him, it's going to be special, but that's not the right word and a terrible comparison, but I'm not like really good with that stuff. But I think Merca is going to be somebody that goes a lot higher than consensus. 6'6",
Yeah,
right-handed defenseman, and has a lot of personality and edge to his game.
I
I
agree
think
on
that
that.
exactly like somebody that had a very disappointing combine, if that's the right word, is Ivan Ryabkin. I could totally see him being a mid-second, maybe third round pick now, even
That's
though
where
he was
I've
a
got
top
him.
10 pick. Yeah. I think that consensus is going to kind of be freaked out based on where he was ranked, but it's going to be like I don't think it's an Aaron Koviharu type of drop as we see it already. It's more about concerns in a lot of different ways. Character off ice, things like that. Is also engagement level in games. Jacob Ishwazniak answered a lot of questions about his engagement level, his just since December, when scouts started telling him that he needs to be more engaged and focused in games, you saw a different player. And I don't think that a lot of people are talking about that. I talked to him before then and after, and I brought it up to him. He said that he's just focusing in heavily on trying to stay motivated and engaged during the games. He sometimes got bored out there and didn't know what to do, and now he's not. Colin Potter is somebody that has enormous arms. They're not muscular, but they're enormous. You can see the guys that are in the NCAA working out 4 times a week rather than the guys that are skating. It's just kind of a different level. James Haggins is built. His lower body isn't Bedar's level, but it's near that. I would say it's a tier, it's a notch down, but he actually surprised me. I really
Hmm.
enjoyed my talk with James Haggins. Very cool kid. He's somebody that I wish the Blackhawks would take him at 3. It's obviously not going to happen, but he would be the perfect fit. There's Malcolm Spence did phenomenal. He just has some aura towards him. I think he's like a third line superstar. Like I don't say that. Like I can see him as a middle six player, like a very good middle six, like elite third line player. But I think that he could be kind of like a Brandon Saad where he plays on the top line during the playoffs. But it's not like he's more of a Carter Verhaeghe than a Brandon Saad because Brandon Saad or Carter Bear's comp was Brandon Saad, but Malcolm Spence was Carter Verhaeghe. And then I started watching based on how they play in the playoffs, and it's very similar. If you saw him at Erie playing with Martin Misiak, and those two were just dominating without Matthew Schaefer. So I thought that was really interesting to think about. Obviously, there was a couple guys that didn't talk. I didn't get to talk to Carbonneau and N- there Nesbitt was hard to get to. Mason West said that he will be playing football for his senior year, but the thing
Yeah.
about that is that that's tough to draft a high school player that's also playing football, but I think he's going to go top 40. I don't see this guy slipping past the top 40 picks. I don't know if he's a first round pick. He might be. I think a team could take a chance on him, but some players that are in high school, teams cross them off their board. So that's the reason that I'm a little iffy if he goes to the first round. But this kid is legit. He's legit 6'6" and a quarter. I think that he has a lot of talent and possesses a lot of upside for players that, he has a higher floor. I think he's definitely a bottom 6 at worst, like because of his physicality and the way that he has that upside. He's a better AJ Spellacy, but taller. And a lot of the questions that were asked to him were about his quarterback play, which was kind of funny to me. But I think that he answered every question very well. And, I think Coots was also a cool one because he was the best player a lot of players played against in the WHL. And I asked him about that because Cam Schmidt said that you could barely do anything on Braden Coots when he was on the ice. And he says it's his intensity and his drive. It's just his hard no play. He's going to be like a mosquito out there. And I really like that. And I don't think that it shows up on the scoreboard or the stat sheet. So Joshua Ravensbergen was absolutely fantastic to talk to. He said that he's a really great skater. And then me and Chris Peters went back and forth that during the questions, I asked him what his strengths was, and Chris Peters was like, well, "What does skating do for you as a goalie?" And he's like, "It helps me retrieve pucks. It helps me feel that I can skate and be on edge, even if I feel off balance, because I understand it. I feel like it gave me a little more insight on goalies because you don't always think about skating as such an aspect, but it actually is. So there's so much I could talk about here, but I want you to go in here and ask me some questions if you have any, but that's kind of the rundown.
That's awesome. I mean, that was a great first segment. I didn't have to do any heavy lifting there whatsoever. Thanks for just like layering in the insights there on the combine. But that wraps up this first segment. In the next one, we're going to delve in a bit more to those questions that I've prepped here for you. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Take control of your finances at Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for half off your first year. That's at monarchmoney.com. All right, let's keep this episode rolling here in the second segment. And I do have some questions prepped here. So, for you audience members, I will still be speaking a little bit here in this episode. Do not worry. But let's kick things off with asking a little bit about. We already kind of broached who you thought maybe like hurt their draft stock the most, being Ivan Ryabkin, and we can get into that in a second. But who rose their stock the most at the combine, do you think?
For me, I think it was Simon Wang. I think he answered a lot of questions about going to college early. I think it's a year too early to go to BU because like he could potentially lose a lot of minutes if he doesn't prove that he can translate, and it could really hurt him. He's a phenomenal skater, and at that size, it's pretty incredible. But you have a ton of people going there this year at BU. I can name off seven of the probably top 64 in this draft that are going there, maybe six. I mean, Sasha Badim or Sasha Bomidian, Jack Murtag. I mean, Jack Pridham and Bourvaz going there. So there's just so many guys. Carter Amico is also a right-handed defenseman. That's 6'5". He's going there. So, um, I, you know, obviously, I think Carter Amico and Simon Wang would be a fantastic pair because they'd both like you can allow Simon Wang to just kind of figure it out, and then Carter be that defensive player that you're just like he's your stability back there. But I think that like Simon Wang did a fantastic job answering the questions. I think Mason West answered great questions. Somebody that just shocks me every time he opens his mouth is Matthew Schaefer. I mean, this kid is so mature for his age.
Yeah.
Obviously, he can't help his stock out any more than he already has, but there's a reason he's going to go number one. I think Will Horkoff is somebody that is
Mm,
interesting. He interviewed with 31 teams, and the 32nd that he didn't interview with was my Chicago Blackhawks. So I think like
okay.
they have to be interested in him too. So I think every team is interested in Will Horkoff. Riker Lee was somebody that came from my neck of the woods in the North Shore of Illinois. He played at the Centennial Ice Rink and in Highland Park. And, that's where I went to school, Highland Park High School. And the thing is, he's been the talk of the town for a lot of years, playing against Cole McKinney and Asher Barrett. And the thing was, like, I asked Cole McKinney and Asher if they played with Riker Lee after his growth spurt because he went from 5'7" to 6 and he's still growing. And they said no, but you can tell that there's a different guy in there because you can tell, like, Riker Lee even said this, like, going to Michigan State, he's just going to be able to use his body and try to learn his game. So I just feel like that would be a fantastic, fantastic option in the early to second rounds. William Moore was fantastic. He has a lot of fans at the combine, even after his clips were going absolutely nuts for his player comp and his strength and all of the above. I think Adam Banach did pretty well because like he was small. You could obviously tell, but the thing was his English was a lot better than I had imagined. Um, there was Shane Van Sage was really cool. You can tell like that man is going to probably make the NHL no matter what. I don't see a scenario where he's not a bottom sixer.
I feel like he'd probably play fourth line minutes next season and he wouldn't stand out horribly. Like he's just built for NHL hockey.
Yeah.
But I did want to broach a little bit that Ivan Ryabkin falling because I find it interesting that as somebody who's had him ranked like mid-second round at highest for the last like 6 months, I find it almost surprising that like his stock would fall further at the combine because I feel like all the things that might influence at the combine in terms of the work ethic and all these different aspects were just on display all year on the ice in terms of what I was seeing in terms of the intensity, the lackluster defensive engagement, the arrogance at times of thinking that he's the best player on the ice and overestimating his abilities constantly, and still being able to score at a decent clip in the USHL, but a lot of it being like empty calorie points or played a big role on a team that won the championship, which is of course that should not be understated, but I watched like five of the Muskegon playoff games, and I think like Ryabkin stood out to me on like maybe three total shifts in those games. Like he was getting some points. He was, I think, just over a point a game in the playoffs, but so much of it was just a power play pass. That's a nice one, and it's just like one little glimpse into the playmaking ability, but there just being such a difficulty of stringing things together into a cohesive game. And he has that physicality, he has that anger, but how do you channel that proactively? There's still a lot, I think, that has to be learned for Ryabkin, and also some things that maybe have to be unlearned with him as well in terms of the on and off ice habits.
I think you nailed it because he was in his mind, I could totally see it. It's like when you think you're better than you are at anything, and you come into the level thinking that it's going to be a little different. There's going to be like an ego death for you that needs to happen. I don't think it ever happened for Ivan. He was probably the fourth best player on his team, 2026 eligible Lawrence.
Yeah.
And then you had Vaslav Nestrasil, you had Luka Radicevic, and I could interview any of the Lumberjacks players this season except Ivan Ryabkin, and they were hiding him from interviews. And I think it was not for anything other than like, I think that his camp, his team, and Muskegon, they all knew like he might not be the best interviewer. And then they should have actually just pushed the interviews and then just tried him to get more confident during the NHL draft process, but because it sounded like it was very bad for the interviews. And maybe it was just that he was overconfident or he just couldn't figure it out. But once this guy matures, if he does mature, you're getting a very good player. And the thing is, like, it takes a lot to mature, and maybe he never does, but he was putting up numbers equivalent to Matvey Michkov and Ivan Demidov like 2 years out, maybe even yeah, maybe last year, but I don't know. I mean, he was very high up on the board, and then he just fell off a cliff. I think that that's going to continue, and there's going to be a ton of teams, maybe 5 or 10 teams that have him crossed off their list entirely of not draftable, and obviously there's going to be a range where a pick maybe I'm going to make a wild guess here and say the Habs are going to draft him because the Habs have a ton of picks. They have enormous amount of picks in the top 3 rounds, and they just took Demidov. So maybe they bring in another Ivan and are just like, hey, it's a free pick for us. Because what do you guys have like 79 and 83, like 3 picks in that cluster? I could totally see if he's falling there, they pick him up. Um, so that's going to be my guess of where he goes.
If he's available that late, I guess sure. I think the difficulty of me seeing it with Montreal specifically is just how much weight they put into character in this administration of the front office. And if this is a guy who's arrogant and bombing interviews, that's not a player that the Habs are going to be all that infatuated
That's
with, in
true.
my opinion. I think that of all the NHL teams, the Habs are like top five in terms of those that value the interview and the character the most. So that unless he interviewed well in Montreal and it's like a reverse Mitchkov situation where he's like bombing all of his interviews except the teams that he wants to go to, like I don't know. But interesting to kind of hear you speak about also the risers in terms of the combine. I think that Will Horkoff is a really interesting one, right? Like the son of an NHL player who captained, of course, the Edmonton Oilers back in the day. has a lot of physicality to his game. And the thing that I was always left impressed with when I watched Bill Horkoff play, like he's big, he's like 6'5", and he plays well along the boards, but it's the intelligence, the timing, these little details in his game, especially the intelligence in his passing implications and playmaking off the boards, like really impressive. And in terms of like a guy who could just be a specialist winger at the NHL level and like on a third line or something, and who eats some big minutes in the playoffs, I think that teams could really like him. But going back to like the interviews and like whether it's availabilities with players at the combine or interviews that you just did and conducted throughout the season on your own behalf, is there one player who stood out as being like the best interview, just like floored you? Like apart from Matthew Schaefer, like we know that Matthew Schaefer wins that award this season. Like he's
Yeah.
just phenomenal in every single like he's like he's mature as like a 55-year-old, right? Like this is a very refined person and player. But beyond him, who stood out to you in interviews the most?
I think Malcolm Spence, his teammate at Erie Otters, another he's really close with Matthew Schaefer, so they probably had the same PR person if they did. But it was just a genuine conversation. And I think with some of these kids that are playing in these bigger locations around the world, I think that like they're more PR trained as well as you get more introduction to the media. Like I'll say Radim Merca also is probably a superstar because I don't think he really had that in Seattle. I like they can go anywhere and no one's gonna even know who they are basically. Well, Redeem's a little different, but Brandon Coots, like people didn't really come up to him. Like I said, he went to Chipotle every single day, and like I always say that shows his consistency because like when you're doing that, you're gonna go if you're getting the same thing over and over, it's like consistent. But Radim Merca, like that guy is awesome to talk to. And Milton Gastrin, I would say, is somebody that I want to put in here too, because he was very honest about the draft process. And obviously, like it was about how tired he was sometimes and like how you have to perform on the ice as well as interviews and do all this weird stuff like busy work and stuff like that. But you're interviewing with like 30 people all the time and there's just not a lot of like time for family or your own time. And I think that Vaslav Nestrasil is also one too. I love his camp. I love him as a person. Like he's really great, very fun to talk to. So those guys, those four players, I think are the best.
Yeah, I listened to like your entire interview with Václav Nesteršil and like
Yeah.
just had a blast. Like he's just like such a fun player to like listen to, and just a very like sincere person who just comes across very honestly. And his mention as well, like just like Braden Coots, the nightly Chipotle routine seems to be a staple for multiple prospects in this year's draft class. But in terms of like the interview process, you kind of get a bit of a window into how these players tick, how they think, not only the game, but as human beings as well. Who was like the biggest like outside the box thinker that you talked to among draft eligibles this season?
Bill Zonin, actually. It was Bill Zonin. I was shocked. He's very strategic. I would I would say he's like an owl. He's
Hmm.
he's very smart. He played chess growing up, and it's just one of those players that when you are talking to, you're like, this guy has it figured out. I think that he aced the interviews really well. And I was just very pleasantly surprised with the type of person that I was talking to because you never know who you're going to talk to. But the thing was, like, he was just so open with me about the things he liked as a kid. And it was just a really good interview. And I think that he was very intelligent and it was more than most, I mean, more than I'm not gonna like try to out, but like I believe that he was probably one of the most intelligent people I've talked to. Like, yeah.
And as a follow-up question, like what did he talk about in terms of like the chess background in his youth? Like as somebody who also enjoys playing chess myself, I'm very curious about that insight.
Well, me and him both were like chess champions in fourth grade, and I
Nice.
had brought it up because that's always my question. I was like chess or checkers, and then we kind of got onto a little bit of a rant about this. But he grew up playing chess at a very high level, and I think that it would be kind of cool to do an interview while also having a chess game on. I've never thought about this, but like, how cool would it be if you're playing chess with a prospect and then it's just like your faces are off to the side. I'm just answering questions like hot ones, but you're also playing chess because I feel like you can see how somebody thinks when they're playing chess, and he probably crushes me. I mean, I was pretty good in
Oh yeah.
like when, but I feel like he is a lot better based on the conversations that we had. I mean, I would try to forward move checkmate him, but I don't think that would work, just as a sneaky move. But the way he thinks was very interesting to me.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And like one last question about the combine itself here was, what was like the funniest moment for you, whether it came in an interview, a scrum, or elsewhere?
So, okay, there was two things. The media scrum was really funny because there was Murka that did two things. One, I asked him about Yager, and he tried to hit him, and he couldn't because he was too slippery. And he was like, even my coaches said that you can't hit him. And then one guy was like, well, do you want to hit a 52-year-old? And he like paused for a second, and he didn't answer directly, but he was like, no, no, I don't want to. And then someone had to show him a picture because I asked him, do you know, did you meet with Kyle Dubas? And he's like, uh, I'm not sure. And then they showed him a picture, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that was him. That was him." And everyone just cracked up. And then the second one was Anton Frondel and Victor Eklund were talking in front of the media, and somebody brought up, "Are you both competitive about who's going to go first?" And Victor Eklund was like, "No, no, like we're just great friends." And Anton was like, "No, yeah, it's fine." Like he paused for like 5 seconds, and
Very clearly matters to Anton.
yeah, yeah. And Victor started cracking up, and the entire media area was just laughing and bursted out. And then I I want to post like I want to give you the clip of Victor like turning to him like what, and then Anton like this, and it was just so funny that I feel like anybody that's watching this should definitely see it. I'll send Sebastian the clip so that you can put it up if you can. But that was so funny.
And I mean, I've only heard great things about both Eklund and Frondella's people as well. Like just like super open, very personable, very honest as well, and have like a level of self-reflection and awareness as well with their games. So definitely, I think those are two guys that probably interviewed very well and convinced a couple teams. But that wraps up this second segment. Let's dive right into the third here by talking about just a little bit of a mock draft kind of game here. Which players post combine, if you could have two names, if you were in the seat as Chicago GM, who are your two picks at number three? Who's on your board?
Well, the first one I would say Gavin McKenna. I would just run up there like the Panthers did that one
Yes.
year. No, but I would say Porter, Martone, and Haggins are higher up on my list than Anton Frondel and Desnoyers, even though Desnoyers had the bum wrist, and I totally get that, and it did affect his play within the last second half of his year, and I think it was way before the Mem Cup. I actually talked to somebody today from the Chicago Sun-Times, and he said it. He talked to him at the combine. I did not get a chance to talk to him directly, but I did talk to him at the media scrums, and he said about his wrists real quick here because it's going to be Frondel or Desnoyers. I know that it's going to be them, but who I would pick personally would be Haggins or Frondel because I think Haggins would kind of be that boomer bust type of talent. But the thing with him is, if you're getting a boom, you're getting a Jack Hughes, Logan Cooley-esque player. Like I'll throw Frank Nazar in there, probably better playmaker, but more speed than Frank Nazar. I mean, Frank Nazar is more speed, but James Haggins is a better vision and playmaking. I think that the one thing I'll say on James Haggins is that he had a tough year based on the projections of him because he was going and playing the Will Smith role with two players that were the best prospects in their entire prospect pool, Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault, and he had to play the Will Smith role. And the thing was, he was a 17, 18-year-old playing against 22 to 25-year-old men every single night, and he was still a point per game player, even though he was not ready. I think Macklin Celebrini and Adam Fantilli hurt the vision that or I think it hurt the expectations put on guys that come directly into the NCAA. I do not think James Haggins was ready, and he was still a point per game player. I
Yeah.
believe that this guy is going to be an absolute star in the league, and even if he doesn't work in the center of the ice, because I do not believe that he can get to the center of the ice consistently, he will be a great winger. And I think that any team would love to have a player like that. I think the Predators are going to luck out and get him. It's going to be really annoying because I spent every night hoping the Blackhawks lost during the season just to get a guy that we could get at 6 or 7 potentially. But Anton Frandell is legit. He has a great like a slap shot, and I totally understand, his two-way versatility and His his transition game will get better going to the from the SHL to the like American Hockey League rink size, and I get all of that stuff. But I just think that Porter Martone would be the perfect fit with Bedard, and James Haggins would be the perfect fit with this team.
And a real quick fire question here. Who are two names that are on your radar for that 25th overall selection for Chicago?
Vasilov Nestersil, I talked to his camp. They said it was a couple of days ago. They said that the Blackhawks are very interested, and their serious interest is the exact question because or the exact quote. But the thing is about that is they didn't take any prospects to dinner during the combine, but they did take Vasilov Nestersil to dinner earlier in the season, and then they also met with him early in the combine. So six 6'6" forward now. I mean, he got listed at 6'6" on the updated rankings. So 185 pounds. He has a lot of frame to fill. In the first 8 games last year when he played in the debut for the USHL with Muskegon, did not look as good as he did. And then he got a great jump. And what did he have? He had 42 points in 61 games. Like that was an incredible point totals for a championship team. I think this kid is legit. I think he's a superstar in my opinion. I think that he could get potentially taken up in the top 20. I think that this is a sleeper, but everybody knows about it now. And Vaslav Nestersil went from like 40 in my rankings to about 25. I really do believe that that would be the perfect fit for the Blackhawks. I think a player like Mason West and Jack Murtagh could also be the 25th pick. I'm not that high on Mason West. I think we could get him at 34. But if the Blackhawks truly like this guy and his upside, take the upside play. We have 12 picks in the first 2 rounds of the next 3 years. I think you just got to go upside, upside, upside. Shane
Mm.
Van Sage, I think, is somebody that we don't have right now. Just an absolute bull on the ice. Somebody that you can just put into your third or fourth line and then just let him cook in the playoffs. Even if there's size concerns and you're playing against a really good forward that's on the smaller side, you put him on your first line if it's a good matchup in the playoffs. I think he's a matchup. I think he's a multiplier. So you're bringing someone that could end up being a very good weapon for you and a chess piece. I think Bill Zonin, like I said, speaking of chess, would be a fantastic fit for the Blackhawks. Somebody like Jack Nesbitt, 6'4", kind of plays that old-timey style. Did very well in the interviews, and he was a point per game player basically in the OHL, just one off. And I'll say the last one because I can name a couple of guys here, but Milton Gastrin. I love the way he plays. We do not have a Milton Gastrin on our team. Obviously, Milton Gastrin 6'1", like 190 pounds, 185, somewhere around there. But the thing with him is he can get to the middle of the ice. He's not afraid to get hit. He will be there for the power play, in my opinion. He could screen the goalie. He has really good hands. He's a very down to earth guy that I would love the Blackhawks to draft. Yeah.
Awesome. And just a very quick fire here for my segment here for 5 players. I'm thinking about for the Montreal Canadiens picks at 16 and 17. You have Carter Bear and Victor Eklund who play similar styles. I think that the Montreal Canadiens would love with their intensity, their grit, their playmaking skill. Justin Carbonneau makes a bunch of sense as the homegrown high skill guy. I think he'd be a perfect fit in Montreal. Logan Hensler as a smooth skating right shot defenseman who brings a physical edge. I'm writing a report, I'm writing an article on him for Elite Prospect at the moment, so he's at the top of my mind. And Lyndon Lakovic is, as you said, a superstar player. But that wraps things up here for the show today. Thank you so much for listening. As always, go check out Anthony's stuff over at the Prospect Don, wherever you find your stuff on YouTube or Twitter. That's everything. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I'm your host, Sebastian High, and that's the end of the episode.